Thursday, and welcome to the first LEPC meeting of 2023. Just before I forget, our next meeting is going to be on the 23rd of February, same time, Thursday, 2 o'clock, and we're going to be conducting an annual tabletop exercise developed by the Maritime Cadets. We're going to go over it. Not so much in the normal format because they're not going to be providing it, but we're just going to, the Maritime students were here doing what they were hoping to provide for the school in the way of doing a presentation, but they didn't get picked. So, but they did the homework anyway, so we have it, so we figured we'd make it into a tabletop anyways, even though they won't be presenting. We have the information, and they did a good job. Hopefully they got a good grade anyways. We don't know how well they did, but we hope that they did a good job. So this month we were trying to think of what would be a good topic to discuss, and we figured we could fit it in within the hour or less, and we can open it up for discussion. But we just wanted to talk about managing emergencies. We wanted to talk about some things that we've encountered, some things we couldn't encounter, a little bit about how we address our emergency planning and how we run the EOC during these emergencies. So we have a few incidences that we were going to look back in 2021, 22, and so far we've been dodging the bullet with the weather and everything like that, which is namely our big culprit for problems. But as we found today, we have structure fire this morning, and it was probably as a result of wind and rain effects. So anything can happen regardless of the size of the storm. It's just the impacts from the weather affect a lot of different things. So anyways, some of the things we just kind of, we wanted to touch on, which we'll go through, not specifically in depth on each of these things, but these are the things that we are constantly talking about in emergency planning, and when we're talking about in this presentation itself. But emergency management, what we want to present, a little bit of command and control, the event classification action plans, which we have to facilitate our activities during a storm, special considerations, other support that's available to us, a little bit of the history, unique problems, and like I said, anytime there's any type of weather event, there's a lot of things that are embedded in the weather that can affect our operations, today being one of them, communications training, and just what we're doing about the prevention and mitigation, or just trying to resolve issues. So for us, anybody can look at an emergency, and for everybody, outside of the fire department, when we're looking at emergencies, we're looking at day-to-day incidences. We have alarms, we might have a small brush fire, we could have a dumpster fire, we could have a house fire, we could have many, many medical incidences. For those are, they may be routine for us, but they're always an emergency for others. And most of the general public or the residents, what their emergencies are, like as we noted here, could be car trouble, could be electrical problems, plumbing, repair issues at home. Those are the things that, that they may have to focus on, but we're looking at a greater volume of issues and other problems that may, we may encounter throughout the year. So for us, when we're looking just at emergency management and what types of emergencies, we only have two categories that we're essentially looking at. We're looking at either natural or man-made incidences. So for natural, like I said, today's a wind and rain event. We could have a snow event, we could have a hurricane, we could have a tornado. We knew that you'd have that on Cape Cod, but we have had tornadoes. In the hurricanes, we've been very fortunate, but there are always these, what they call the 100-year storms, that eventually, we are going to get walloped by a storm that develops in the perfect spot with the perfect weather to bring it up the East Coast, and then have that trajectory that brings it right, towards the Cape, and then we're on the wrong side. And in years gone by, and Bob gave a great presentation once about hurricanes back in the earlier times back in the 50s and the 30s. But for us, of recent, in 1991, when we had Hurricane Bob, that was just a Category 1. It was a 2, I think, as it was approaching, and kind of downgraded a little bit. But still, the hurricane, Category 1 hurricane that affected us was it was pretty significant, and we had a lot of damage that happened in town, and that was low on the category scale. Man-made events could be anything that, and we'll go over a few things. Man-made events could be a tanker rollover with considerable amount of product that's leaked, causing environmental concerns. It could happen on Main Street. If that was the case, it could be affecting the if something happened with a truck going down Main Street and there was a lot of people that were in a restaurant and affected a local business. We have many people that are affected. Propane leaks, propane tank, that maybe catch fire and it impinges on a building. All these different types of issues that could be of the man-made scale. We look at, like, for example, Falmouth Hospital has a big liquid oxygen tank that's set up in the back of the back of the building, and we look at that once in a while as a concern. When you look at it, it's a big tall cylinder, but underneath it, it's a big ball of ice. And you always wonder what's underneath that ice. But it's just the way that it's normal operations. But it's, if that thing ever had a breach, it would be a significant problem. Because now we have to worry about an evacuation of the hospital, and that is a very, very time-consuming process, a tedious process, because of obviously people that are ill and getting resources there. So any day we could run into either one. The only thing, as we all know, with the natural events, we usually have considerable amount of forecast ahead of a storm to be prepared. Like this storm that we had this morning, for days they're telling us it's going to be a snow event, and then it's going to be a rain event, it's going to be a mix event, and schools are getting canceled up in the northern part and the western part of the state, and then then the rain got embedded into it, and the weather was a little warmer, and they didn't have the effects, but they were prepared for it. So we obviously do the same thing here. We look at a lot of forecasting ahead of the time. Steve works in the DPW, and they have a new program that they've been following. It helps on a local level. We also have a meteorologist that helps with providing information to us, and Frank O'Laughlin, and he is a great resource for us and gives us a lot of information ahead of storms, and he gives us the down and dirty explanation, and it's a little more understanding when he's doing it versus maybe like the regular newscasts that the meteorologists are looking at a greater scale of New England, and where he focuses just on our area, and that's a great asset for us. So emergency management at any level, obviously, we're looking at just, how it affects public safety, how it's affecting businesses that are closed, losing money. There's a financial aspect of it. Community members, how are they going to be involved in this? We have CERT team members. We have, members in the community, whether it's, different types of group, clergy, church-based, all these different partners that we have out there that, we're all trying to work together. Like, for example, like if we had to open up a shelter, or if we had to provide warming resources, who's going to be open and helping us out? So we, the community comes together. So we consider possible events. We plan, obviously, for high probability, issues. We gather the needed resources to meet the event. Sometimes we get together here early on. We've had pre-planning for hurricanes. We've gotten everybody together in this room. This room has been full before, but when the day of the storm happens, what happens, Greg?
3 or 4 people here.
It's just us. So that's what happens. But but it's comforting knowing that everybody believes in us and trusts the fact that we're going to be able to manage the event, which we do. But everybody comes together, and they then they go into their own little world. But that doesn't mean that we're going to put that aside. We're going to continue to follow the same preparation plans and get everybody's input. tell everybody what we're going to be doing. So if it was something that was in large scale, everybody knows what we're going to be looking at and prioritizing and such. And in the end, we're looking at damage assessment, recovery, and trying to get restoration back to what we would call normal. Some of that happens well beyond the storm. Sometimes it can go on for years, correct? Between Kim, who does a lot of paperwork with the DPW, Steve probably involved in it, but when after a storm, if the federal government declares a disaster, it provides a disaster declaration for a particular area, then that releases FEMA money. But if it doesn't meet that threshold, then there's no money coming in. We have to look at our internally, and I mean that the town has to start to look at providing some funding for making restorations and getting things back. If FEMA is involved, they come down, but it's a very lengthy process. It takes years to try and sometimes recover money from FEMA. And sometimes we stop looking for assistance, correct? They just, Steve will attest to it, and Kim, we just, after a while, we've already moved on. So, but it's there in case we need it. But again, the Cape is very unique. Quick example, the Sandwich had, their boardwalk was damaged in one of the recent storms, and they finally got the monies to repair it, but they didn't get it through FEMA because FEMA didn't declare a disaster, didn't have a disaster declaration. And then when it was all said and done, the Coast Guard had to sign off on the repairs. And when I asked the fire chief at Sandwich, who's the emergency management director, why is the Coast Guard signing off, and he said, that's a good question. He didn't know. He just said, but they were the lead agency to sign off on a bridge repair, on a walkway repair. So, but we work with our partners out there, and again, the federal government and the state, to try and, at least help our community get back on its feet. So again, for us, we're looking at action plans, our planning guides. We have a lot of information that's provided to us. It's very voluminous, the plans that have been created out there. Incident command, we utilize that all the time. We always say, incident command for newbies. Every once in a while, we'll touch on all the acronyms and what the verbiage is and what incident command is like on a smaller scale, on a routine scale, or on a large scale. We usually are on the routine level, and sometimes it's we dive into it a little deeper, but incident command on a major scale has many different facets and branches, and it breaks down for logistics and planning and things. We haven't reached that scale of working with FEMA to have these teams come in here and manage the incident with us. Cape does have an incident management team, but we usually, in all instances, even if it's that large, we always have to have one person that's in charge in conducting incident command. There's a lot that it entails, but we routinely do it. So, for example, today, again, we had a structure fire, so we have to have one person that's in charge, and we have a lot of ancillary people that are working to manage the incident. And then there's just emergency planning. Kim does an awful lot of that. She does a lot of preparedness, gets the website going. We try and get information out. We have FCTV here that's helping to get the message out as well, provide public safety announcements with them. They film this every month for us, and for those that can't get out to participate, that at least they can watch it from home, and they can see what is in store, and we can do live feeds from the fire station here as well. Jeff has to check the equipment today, but we do have the ability to provide public safety announcements or live public information, account from town officials should we need to make these notices to the residents. So there's always got to be a form for something. So we like to use checklists in the fire department. I like using checklists. Lieutenant O'Malley let me borrow a book called The Checklist Manifesto, and it was written by a surgeon. And it makes sense that a surgeon should have a checklist, because you forget a sponge in somebody, or you forgot to turn this on or turn this off. And this one surgeon that wrote this book had developed a lot of information from mistakes that were made over the years, and by developing checklists, you certainly avoid making mistakes or forgetting to do something, and it's greatly enhanced outcomes and just daily activities. So for us, we do have forms that are available to us. We also have forms that are available to us on the federal level. That's this ICS 2015 is a form that we actually use. It's a worksheet, and we provide this to our personnel in the outlying stations. So when we do have our EOC activated, and in the instances of, like, say, blizzards and big storms where we have isolated stations with crews of personnel, we give them these forms and we ask them to fill them out so that we can log and document the activities from each of these stations. Because eventually, if we are trying to regain services, and that involves reimbursement from the federal government, we have to have documentation, and Kim's had to do that with us over the years, where we've had to go through all of our incident logs. We've had to look at how much overtime monies were spent, et cetera, what resources we had to use, whether we were feeding people, whether we had to buy equipment, whatever the case may be. And these forms are very beneficial to us to help with the reimbursement scheme of things. We also have internal forms that we use. So when we are preparing for a storm, we look at what the level, we created levels of response within our department. So we dictated that a level 1 would, for example, would be a snow event with 12 to 24 inches of snow, a hurricane category 1. And in this instance, what's highlighted underneath the level 1, we have determined that we could probably handle it with about 26 personnel, which is, and all these personnel are distributed amongst our 5 stations. If it's a bigger event, a level 2, then we're looking at 24 to 36 inches, we got 3 feet of snow on the ground, we got a category 2 or 3, we up the ante, we put more personnel on, and so on and so forth. When we get to the level 4, it's what we said, it's a situational need, and we'll try and bring as many people back from our department as possible, and in this instance it may be the entire department. Doubtful, because some people can't make it back to work because the storm is affecting them as well. So we try and get people on a little earlier prior to a storm so that we can embed people. So we had to plan for that, and we have to document who is going to be working, and also where they're going to be and what they're going to do. So we developed this a while ago, and so when we do declare, say, a level 1 storm within our department, we can hand this form to the shift commander downstairs, and that takes that part of the management away from us so that we can concentrate on other things, and they can take care of the personnel and the station resources that are needed to address the incidents that are ongoing throughout the day. So we found this to be very helpful, and we developed it a while ago, because before, we had computers and we had the ability to have technology helping us out, texting and such like that. We used to just have to call people by phone, or we'd write things down on paper. So we got a little smarter, and we started to develop plans so that we can immediately look them up, and they're available at just a mouse click away. We also have a preparedness or readiness checklist that we created. And this, again, we can give it to the shift commander downstairs, and they can start looking at the things that are going to be necessary for us. For example, we want to make sure that all the vehicles are fueled. We want to make sure that we're working with our partners in DPW, and that our mechanic also has a truck and he's got fuel tanks on it. He can fuel vehicles. We want to make sure his truck is full. So if the DPW pumps went down because they lost a generator for a little bit, we still aren't without fuel. We can at least get some fuel into our trucks to keep them going if they were on the road for a lot. Generators at each of our stations before a storm, we try and check them out. Snow shovels, it seems silly, ice melt, but we start to do things. Even putting flags away. having a checklist allows us to not forget some things that, and to just keep reminding people, always, again, once the storm's been, we determine that we're gonna have a particular level of readiness, we give these checklists or these forms out to our personnel, and they just take it from there. So this is how we prepare, and it's worked out very well for us. When you look town-wide, we're very fortunate. There's a lot of agencies and businesses that have been active in planning. So when you look at the list that's here, we have a traffic plan that's put out through the state and the state police. Hazardous materials emergency plan that's within our department. We also have the Quistit Harbor oil spill, which is in conjunction with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. We actually have equipment from the Buzzards Bay oil spill for spills that were provided to us. We have a lot of booms and padding and things that we can use for absorbing any type of material, any type of spills into the waterway. We want to protect that. So we work in conjunction with our partners with the Buzzards Bay Coalition. And also WHOI has provided their CEMP. They have a very comprehensive emergency management plan that's available. Every year they do it. They have a great group of personnel down there that are dedicated to making sure that these emergency plans are in place. They're good for us, it's good for them, but it's also sometimes they need it for accreditation for certain things that they might do year to year, whether it's with their insurance companies and looking at the hospital has to have a joint accreditation. They have to have people come there, and they have to have these plans in place in order for them to be accredited. The other thing is the last thing that we just did that we were participating in, which is the Falmouth Multi-Hazard mitigation plan. They do it every 5 years, and that also has to be updated to allow, again, for FEMA. FEMA wants to know that everything's being looked at, and that includes what we would do in case we had a flood in a particular area. Like we talked extensively about the harbor. Mr. Griffin over here is very active over at the Harbor Master's office, but we talked about if there was a flood in the harbor, what is going to be affected. We have three elderly housing complexes right there. What if the sea level rose because we had the waters were coming in on a surge? What would we do to get them out? How are we going to get them? Should we be doing it ahead of time? So all these plans are in place that we can reference, not during the storm, but ahead of the storm. So that's where our preparedness, and so these are all available to us. Again, when you look at incident command, which we utilize a lot, we try and develop our command and control, and this allows us to manage an incident. So this picture is of our command and control board. These are in two of our incident command vehicles, which is the deputy fire chief's vehicle and the shift commander's vehicle. This particular command and control resource is in a big suitcase, and it's on wheels, and it can also it has legs so it can act as a table. And we open it up, and it's customized for us so that we can look and sketch and write down notes. And we also use it for an accountability system, because any of our personnel that are working in what we call immediate dangerous to life environment, it's we have to account for anybody that's going into these situations so that we know where they are. If something was to happen to somebody, then we know where they are, and if they needed help, we can look. And if you look at like the bottom, for example, this is we're writing down where everybody is. This crew right here, these tags would indicate that they're working up on the second floor. These tags over here, that there's two gentlemen that are doing the ventilation. They're on the ladder, and there's two tags there. So we kind of, we managed it to the best of our ability. You can imagine what it's like, what it could be like for one person as you're trying to manage a multitude of things at once. But that's why we break down a lot of jobs into with other officers or other personnel to manage the personnel. So if we had somebody that was working on the second floor, one of these people might be in charge, and we would be managing they'd be managing that area and reporting back to us. So we've gotten very good at it. However, each incident isn't routine. It sounds like it might be routine, but it's not. But you know, we just always approach it from the same basic format. We start with determining what we got, what we need to do to control the situation, and how we're going to control the situation. So if we have a structure fire, what we want to do is we want to put the fire out. How are we going to do that? We're going to use water. How are we going to get the water? We're going to use hose lines. We're going to use personnel. We're going to get smoke out of the building. Those are all our tactical objectives, but our strategy is to put the fire out. It's pretty simple. So if we approach every incident like that, even in here, then we're not missing a lot of these steps. We don't want to jump all the way to the end. We want to keep doing the basics and start off at the beginning. So we have duty assignments, jobs, descriptions, where they report. And then the other thing is if you've ever heard the term freelancing, this avoids people just doing what they want to do. And that's in a simple phrase that we don't want people just going off doing something. We want to be coordinated when we're doing it. And when we're working in here, we have a few pictures of that. And this is a tabletop exercise where we have everybody together in here. We bring together our team. Again, a lot of you in here, you represent a different, an organization or a business, and you're here because you might be responsible for operations. You might be involved with human resources. We might have to have somebody with public relations for the media side of things. We might have environmental concerns. We might have engineering issues from like the DPW and legal. You know, in the end, we may need to address that. So we pull everybody together, and when we have some of these bigger exercises, we bring in all of our partners and everybody that could potentially be involved in it, and just go over things and just practice. And that's what we'll do next month. Hopefully we'll break it down and we'll have a good tabletop exercise. We can expand it any way, shape, or form. Again, ICS can be at the basic level or a very large scale. And these two pictures are a good example of storms or events that we've had in town. This here was during the October storm when we had that massive wind event that came throughout, that just developed. I don't know if it was a bombogenesis. But that's what it was. And Eversource had to come down here, and they took over. If anybody had the opportunity to go down to the mall, you probably wouldn't, but down at the mall, the entire mall parking lot was created into like divisions. They had the poles, they had the transformers, they had all the cables, they had all the bucket trucks all lined up, and they brought all their command and control equipment down. And behind that, they fed everybody. They had tents set up, they had food available for all their workers, and that was all over by Walmart. So I went down there. I was impressed that they came down with the equipment that they did, but it was such a large scale event, and we had such massive power outages in the area, and Falmouth was one of the harder hit communities. They came down here in mass, and they set up their command and control and logistical support teams, and they embedded somebody, and we had our emergency operations center was active, and they embedded a liaison in here to work with us, and we communicated all of the issues with them, where we needed to get power, like, if we want to make sure that our critical infrastructure is taken care of early on, and then start to get residents on, although most people think it should be backwards, but we try and, we address where our critical infrastructure is through this hazards mitigation plan that the town did with us, so we know where all the areas are, and again, we have to coordinate, in this instance, with Eversource. We also can use our partners at the state level for the Department of Fire Services, and these two vehicles here help support the road race. During the road race, we have such a large scale event, and you can imagine, even though it's just a road race, there's close to 100,000 people that are in town. And out of those 100,000 people, they may be either involved in the race or they're visiting, but the race goes from Woods Hole all the way to Falmouth Heights. We have a large area that we have to be responsible for, and we set up this communication platforms for us, and one of them is the truck that's on the right is where all the command and control occurs, and that's all the communications equipment. It's a big vehicle that allows us to operate in there. And the one over to the left is ready to serve as an emergency operations center. If we had if somebody, God forbid, decided to wreak havoc along the race route and start striking people with their car and turn into a big, massive law enforcement issue, we can leave one vehicle and go get together and try and work together with our our partners and try and manage the event as well, and be out of out of the command side of things, and and eventually come together in an admin function and try and work on solving a lot of the issues that might be we might be confronted with. Again, the silly slide, Kim Thomas. But
You want to make sure everybody knew.
yeah, but it is funny, but anybody that's in a position, if we do like a tabletop exercise, we always have the tables all set up, and each table has a representative that has to either take notes and has to when has to talk for the group. Nobody likes to do that. And this is a perfect example of that, because sometimes I'll sit there and I'll say, okay, fine, Boyd, you're going to do it. And Boyd's like, I don't know. But, so he doesn't have any hair, so he's not going to have a hair-raising sensation. He might have brain lock. He might have steam coming out of his ears. He might have palpitations. Or he can be like Craig and just be cool, calm, and collected, and just, you're just giving a little bit of information as you go along. Certainly Deputy Thrasher exemplifies that, so he's cool, calm, and collected all the time. We like to tease because we've all been put in these positions, and we record everything, so we know what everybody sounds like, and we listen to it after the fact, and we do post-incident analysis, and we look to see where we went wrong, what we did right, what we could do to improve. We all make mistakes. But the best thing that you can do is, if you are going to be in a command situation, that you are kind of instilling a little bit of not decorum, but you're just trying to keep everybody focused on what they're doing. And if you're out of control, or if you're really scattered, or you seem like you're making you're kind of indecisive, then the group is going to become the same. So it is, it is important to, to not just look the part, but be the part. So, but none of us have mustaches like that. So, for us, this room serves as our emergency operations center during a storm or any type of event. So if it's a natural or man-made event. So we designed this early on with Chief Broder's vision that we'd have a place to be able to conduct our operations on a town-wide basis. And originally it used to be in the basement at Town Hall. That doesn't work because it's in a flood zone. So we had everything brought over here. So if you look around this room, this serves as our training room as well. But it's designed to have all the technology available to us. And it's all sitting in the background, but if there's something going on, this is what it looks like. This is in the middle of one of our storms. If you look, there's plates all over the place. We can power things. We set up our table. We call this the King Arthur. We set up our tables, and we scale it to whatever the event is, but we also scale it to the amount of people that we have. So we go around the room. There's Steve. He's right there. He's all by himself off to one side. Hopefully we gave him enough coffee. The police are over here. Our gentleman over here, he usually sits at communications. The town manager, the police chief are sitting over here as well. So we set up the phones. We set up all of the, even down to pens and pencils and paper for people to write things down. And then at the back side of the wall, we have our call takers, and they're kind of also helping to take the information and then apply the information that they have to the communication side of the house, try and get the resources somewhere, or talking to the, the incident command side of, of the event. I might have assigned a deputy to operations for the day, so we try and work together to coordinate any type of activity, whether it's police, DPW, Tree department's a good one, DPW has multiple roles. And we do a good job. We actually, you know, we come in here and the activity that's going on, everybody in here is professional, and it's an interesting, you know, event when it's going on, to see the amount of activity and the knowledge that's in this room to try and manage an event. Nobody's getting flustered, everybody's just doing what they normally do. The screens are operating, we're tied into the state, so we can look at the FEMA activity. We can talk to our partners on the Cape through, they call the MAC, the Multi-Agency Coordination Center, which they usually have, we have direct access to. They can get resources for us. We also have contact through the MAC with MEMA if we needed more resources. So it's a well-coordinated activity, but it's all done from in here, and we have a world of experience that's available to us to manage this. So again, there's a lot of equipment here. And, you know, again, we need to have all these things, and, you know, our headquarters has a very large generator so that we can continue to not have any disruption in anything that's going on, which we've been very fortunate. We got a new generator, so we'll see how that goes. Haven't had to really use it yet, but. So, again, you know, how do we classify things? We're looking at the severity, you know, how the event is going to affect, you know, others in the community. Is it an event that's isolated? Is it an event that could definitely affect you know, the rest of the community? And we have a few slides that show that. If a facility is involved, you know, how is it being affected physically? That means the you know, the structural integrity of the building. Is it able to continue to function? If there's a fire on a floor at Falmouth Hospital, for example, if it's a patient room, shutting the door will isolate it. Then closing doors to the corridor leading up to where the room is will isolate it. They can move patients from one area to the next. So you don't necessarily have to have a massive evacuation if you can coordinate, you know, keeping you know, an area confined. If it's something that's out in the community and there's smoke traveling, and we have examples of that, sometimes it's well beyond one area and it might go on for miles. So those are the things that we have to look at, but we do also have a lot of resources available to help manage something like that if it was to occur. So spread is a concern. You know, what do we need to control it? You know, again, it could be, and it could, whatever the event is, it could leach over into another surrounding community. We're partners with Bourne and Mashpee, Joint Base Cape Cod. And what else we need. And again, that's where we can partner up with our incident management teams, and they can help get more agencies involved. So again, coordinated activity. So like we said, the usual suspects for us are mostly weather related, and these are all, you know, from Falmouth. You know, you can see, you know, some of the flooding events. You know, we always have problems on Surf Drive, Minot Road, you know, whatever, south facing. We have Buzzards Bay. Also you know, we can have a storm surge in that area and affect some of the lower lying areas. Main Street, if there's a big blizzard, you know, it's very difficult for the DPW to be plowing. Sometimes they need bigger equipment, but they're all over town, so they might not necessarily be able to get to one area versus the other. Getting our equipment might need to be a priority, so we might have to have dump trucks, big 10-wheelers available to help, you know, make a path for us to get into a particular area. You know, we have, you know, a lot of these, you know, weather events can create havoc on buildings. That was a house that was over on Palmer Ave. The tree just broke off and went right through the house. I don't remember if there was somebody in it.
Yeah.
There was. It was they were lucky they were on the other side. I think we moved them from one house to the next.
Yeah, we just moved them to a
Yeah.
neighbor's house.
So that other one, that car, that was over off of in Falmouth Heights. I was driving around and, you know, came upon it. It was over near McDougal's. It had been there for a while. There was nobody in it, thank God. But it was all tangled up with live wire. And again, you know, we can just monitor the mapping and see what the potential is for the impacts of the area, and everybody's familiar with that. This is Woods Hole during one of the events, and you can see that, you know, if you know, the tide effects, you know, are dramatic in some instances. You know, sometimes we're hopeful that, you know, the tides are you know, it's a receding tide and we're not gonna have problems, but if we have a high tide with storm surge and the wind pushing things in, especially the wind driven, and that, you know, top right is right by the Eel Pond Bridge. So it's, if you've ever walked down there, you know, that's, the tide is, I mean, the water levels are pretty low most of the time, or you know, well below that, but here you got an event that's, you know, it's right up on that walkway, so it's a considerable amount of water. You know, we had all these poles that were damaged during the storm. You know, the bottom left was right along Minot Road. I mean, that was incredible. I mean, it just sheared, it looked like, you know, tornado went through there. It was all snow and ice and wind build up, and it just knocked all these poles off. One pole comes down and starts snapping the rest of them. The amount of activity on the road, you know, there's an example right there. You know, traffic lights are out, and let's face it, everybody likes to go driving around, and that's can make havoc for the emergency workers who are out there. So not only are we worried about our own safety, but we have to worry about the safety of the you know, the utility crews that are working. And in some instances, you know, most of the power might have been secured. In this instance, it looks like the power's dead in that area, but, you know, at the onset, you don't know. During one of the storms that we had a house fire. So this was a wind-driven house fire, and it was difficult for us to get into the area because of the impacts of the snow for our equipment to try and drive in there. But once we were able to get in there, then it's not an easy feat trying to drag hose lines through a lot of snow. And by the time, you know, this house was well involved before we even got there. But we have the, you know, we still have the obligation of putting this fire out. So we have to worry about surrounding structures, but at the same time, we want to make sure that our personnel are safely working and you can see what they're working up against. Power lines. So we have to be very safety conscious when we're trying to work, you know, at some of these incidences. So not only are we dealing with a lot of things in town, residents calling because they, you know, they have a significant problem, to even just people calling up wanting to know when trash is going to be picked up again. And we answer a lot of phone calls, but they don't understand that some of this is going on in the background. We have multiple ambulances out there. We're transferring patients from one place to the next. Somebody that's been without power doesn't have oxygen in their home. They have a little old lady, they don't have heat. We're trying to help them. And in the middle of this takes a lot of resources out of play for us. This fire required us to use other towns, and then we had to have other towns working in here. As far as Hyannis, I think, came into town to work with us. That's how significant the storm was, you know, again, impactful for Falmouth. Not to throw Mike under the bus, but these are examples of, you know, some of our housing complexes during the middle of this storm. These significant, you know, facilities are very difficult or impassable for us because they haven't been plowed yet, because the snow is so significant, and planning to get in and out of these has been hampered by having a large amount of snow. And in typical fashion, we do have calls, you know, more calls in these areas because of the age of the population that's in these facilities. So again, planning is important, but we also may have to address something immediately when there's either a medical or a fire call in one of these areas, and access is very limited in some instances. And during the storm, this was one of the instances that we were finding all over town. We can have unusual events that happen. This was a recent plane crash, and even though this was a single-engine plane with two people that were badly injured, and one succumbed to their injuries, we're in an area that has a lot of air traffic. Everybody knows, if you look up, you'll see jets flying by, you see the military coming by, you see a lot of helicopters. You know, at any given day, there could be a major airline that crashes into an area around here, or a large plane carrying multiple people, or a plane that, you know, that came flying in and they were short of the runway, and they went into a neighborhood. They could have struck a house that could have caught fire and caught other buildings on fire because of exposures. There's fuel, and then there's more person on the ground that could be subjected to this, or they'd be considered an exposure as well. And this was out at the air park out in East Falmouth, and that's the second incident we've had that involved a plane crash where we had fatalities. So that's and that's probably about the fourth aircraft crash that we've had in that area, because it's an active air park. So that, even though it may just be isolated in this instance to one part of the runway, if they hit a residential area, there's going to be potential for a very large scale incident to happen, and then we'd have to be working from here to try and manage that. We can have hazardous materials incidences. This was an example of something that could have turned into a very large scale event. This was an ammonia leak at the Falmouth Ice Rink, and thankfully it happened on a Monday or Tuesday. It was during the morning. So, but if they had an ammonia leak during say a championship hockey game, we could have had multiple injuries, multiple exposed, spectators that could have turned into a very large mass casualty incident. However, it was fortunate that it was just during the day. I don't know if there was any other like skaters in there. It was just the rink operator that was there, and they have equipment to detect this. But there was a significant leak in the building, and so much that we had to call the state hazmat team to come in and try and help mitigate the circumstances and isolate it. So that particular ammonia leak is very hazardous to anybody that comes in contact with it. Mulch fires. Now, we see mulch fires every single year. Every time everybody puts their mulch out to pretty up their flower beds, we see a lot of it at the plaza, the mall. Everybody pretties everything up and gets ready, but people constantly throw cigarettes down. So we can have little mulch fires. But the mulch fires that we're kind of, showcasing here have occurred in two very large mulch recycling businesses in town. One is, we had, I don't have a picture of that? No, this is all in one spot, but there's one in East Falmouth that's All Cape Recycling, and then this one is Blacksmith Shop Road. And if you can look at the scale of how big this is, that's obviously a very large excavator with our personnel, just to show you the scale. That's just a small area. If you kind of look here, this is our hose streams coming off our trucks. There's an excavator, there's an excavator. This whole pile had fire that was burning underneath because of the significant drought that occurred this past year. And if you look at that way that the pile, every day we came back and it was bigger, and flames shooting out of it. And we had to keep pulling it apart to the point where now it's capped. But it took a while. But the reason that we wanted to show this is because if you look to that far left, where that excavator is with the two firefighters, you look at the smoke plume. A lot of people in that area were complaining about smoke. And the smoke is an irritant, so you can have elderly people, people with breathing issues, respiratory problems, and that's a big effect. And if it goes on for days and days and days, we also have to address the air quality in the area. And that's this particular facility has had problems over the years because of the large scale business, but they've had fires there, and it's affected many people in the air in that community.
Chief, can I ask you a quick question?
Sure.
The excavators themselves, are those employees of the business? Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so
if something like this happened outside of a we'll call this a controlled space, right?
Mhm.
Do you guys have a contract with a construction company to get equipment in like this if you need to?
we don't, but we can, yes. In the past, we have contracted, through business owners, if a particular business caught fire, we've worked with them to get an excavator there to start pulling the building apart, because they're gonna have to anyways. They're just doing it a little early. But this local business, thankfully, he has equipment, but he had to, during one fire several years ago, he had to go to a large excavating company, and they had to come down with bigger equipment to help manage this because he couldn't do it with that size equipment. Even though to us this is big equipment, he had to get even bigger equipment to pull it all apart. So we can work through the state to get equipment. We can work through the local businesses to try and make sure that they're following through on our requests. But he had 2 machines and he brought all his personnel in, but he had to have, early on when there was another fire many years ago, he had to go through a construction firm and bring down larger equipment. So it's not that difficult to do, it's just you gotta make sure somebody's gonna pay for it. Usually not us. We just have to be very strong in our requests. Another example of an air quality issue, this was a fire that recently happened over in Joint Base Cape Cod. And obviously, in both these instances, for us, they're impactful to the community. We didn't have the EOC set up, but we certainly had the ability to, if they were going to be long-term events. Joint Base Cape Cod, when they had this fire, this was at a transfer station out there. This transfer station deals with mainly construction debris, so it's all wood. One of our apparatus went there to assist the Joint Base Fire Department along with many other communities. And when I pulled up, it was just one of those days where there was really no wind. It was kind of an inversion kind of day. It was kind of warm. Everything was just laying down. When I went out to my car at 5 in the morning, I came outside. It looked like fog. The smoke, I was like, what the heck is going on here? And it was just laying on top of Falmouth. All the way down to the DPW, it was almost down to Brick Hill Road. So the smoke from the base, from Sandwich Road, layered over Falmouth all the way to Bourne. If that continued on, we had a lot of phone calls, we had a lot of people complaining, oh my God, there's a fire. It takes we actually had to send apparatus to different parts of town to look for what we thought was a fire at the mulch pit, because we're getting multiple calls. But if you look at that smoke plume, that's how much of an impact this fire was having, and it was spreading, and it was just kind of, the smoke was just moving across the Upper Cape. But also, there was rail cars that caught fire as well. Those rail cars were up against the building. They come through, they take the debris, but one of them, they had to back it away from the building. And then while it was backed away, all of a sudden they noticed that the car was starting to catch fire. And so that was a second incident on top of the fire that was over at that building. As you can see where those cars are, it was well away from where the original fire was. So then they had a whole separate incident. And because of that, more resources are being utilized. So that's where the beauty of the incident command, if you have it together, can kind of manage that. And again, if it's impactful for the community, you get the Emergency Operations Center together, and we can kind of coordinate, activities as well. So, any type of release at a facility may, again, can impact us. If, like I said, if the liquid oxygen tank was leaking very badly at Falmouth Hospital, it could have an impact in the area, because we might have to be concerned about, how that high oxygen plume could be affecting, say businesses down on Palmer Ave. The ice rink, like I said, if it releases ammonia, it may be affecting the steamship parking lot. People that are walking in and out of the cars, if it's laying down, it might be making people sick. So again, facilities can create problems for us, so we have the ability to, under this reporting system, so Tier 2, correct, Kim? They have to report and tell us what type of hazardous materials they have on site, so we do have an idea of where most of our hazards are. Again, and we have to, again, look at the weather and such and see how it's going to affect a particular neighborhood. We have to work with trying to, if we had to move people out, we have to get people out of there. How are we going to do that? How are we going to move people? We have to work in conjunction with our mutual aid partners to try and coordinate how to move people. If people can get up and walk and go onto a bus, that's great, we can move them real easy, but if they're not mobile because they have mobility problems, they're confined to a bed, they're coming out of the hospital, then we have to have a coordinated effort in structures and specialized equipment to move people, and then we have to find a place for them. So we have to have a shelter. Can't take critically injured patients or medical patients and put them in the Red Cross shelter at the high school. We have to find another facility of kind that can manage that care of that person. So we may have to move people to these other facilities. We might be able to take the bus people and bring them to a shelter or bring them to an area that they may be able to be safely cared for. But again, the weather could impact them. So if it's brutally cold, it might be a problem. If like that storm that we had in October, that no-name storm that came through, it was nice out. You know, it wasn't that bad being outside. It was just a mess outside. But the cold wasn't bothering us. So these are the things we have to worry about that can again add to our, our need to manage it correctly and properly when we're being requested for certain services. We can have large-scale events that can affect the community as well. That we have to use our CERT partners to help, for searches, and we can have an elderly person, even though it's one single person that is, that may be lost. It takes a lot of resources to look for people. And on the Cape, that's been happening a lot lately. There's been a lot more Alzheimer's patients or dementia patients that have walked away from home, and it takes a lot of effort and command, structure to coordinate searching, and it might be from ground, it may be from air, it may be in the water. So this is a very time-consuming process as well. We can have events like this, which has happened before on the Cape. On the left-hand side is a dump truck, the 18-wheeler that flipped over in the bogs over on Thomas Landers Road. But the second picture could be that same vehicle, and if it was carrying fuel, it could have caught fire. And if it did, you have not only have a plume of smoke that's affecting a certain area, you have a fire that is of concern, but you also have runoff into a watershed of sorts that now has a major environmental impact. That truck on the left-hand side, when it flipped over, thankfully didn't spill a lot of its hydraulic fluid and such, but it was right on the bog. So the bog is a protected area. It's a vital area for businesses. But if we had diesel spill out of there and hydraulic fluid, it could have ruined that one bog. So again, communications is huge. Everything generally gets generated through 911. We have other phone lines. When everybody's together in the room, we're coordinating activities. We can do it by phone, we can do it by radio, but we can do it face-to-face as well, which is preferable in most instances. And they can be happy too when they're involved. Fred doesn't look happy. I think he's half asleep. Again, communications, however way, shape, or form you can get them out there, but we have direct lines, alternate means. We try to not have, there are rumor hotlines. There are some towns and cities that have 311 where you can get information. We don't necessarily have that around here, so everybody just calls 911 or direct lines to ask again, when are they going to plow my street? When are they going to take the trash out? I got to get to Logan. Can you send somebody over to pick me up? And that's not a lie. That's what we get. Those are the calls that we get. Their problem becomes, an emergency for them, but it's not an emergency to us, and we have to be very, we have to deliver the message in a nice way to everybody, just to, without, yelling at anybody or giving them a hard time. We're very good at handling difficult people during stressful times. And we also log everything that we're doing here, so we have a good, we document all of our activity. Contact lists, we have plenty of those. We would hope that others do too. If somebody needed help at home, You know, they should have a tree. We have them here, and we have these planting lists available to us, and they're, you know, we're planting trees, but they're there, and, you know, we try and, like, for example, the town has an in-town phone list, and it changes every month, and sometimes I look for where the changes are, but I don't necessarily see them, but they publish a new phone list every month, and, you know, they do it because it might have had one person's number changed, but it's important to have that person's number. So contact lists are very important for us. We're very fortunate that we have Smart 911, or we have, you know, the Falmouth Alert. It's been advertised. You can go onto the town website. You can just town of Falmouth. You can type in new alert system. You can learn how to get yourself on the list. And when there's an alert, water main break, smoke in the area, there's a street that's impassable, there are certain agencies in town that can put out a widespread message to everybody so that people are alerted in case you know, there's going to be an impact in their area or townwide. So from our standpoint, we just, you know, ask if you got your own agencies to just kind of go over the same thing with personnel. Nobody should be surprised if you've been notified for 5 days that there's going to be a storm. Obviously, a man-made incident, that's something that you have to work at. But if you plan for the events ahead of time, you're going to be, you know, you're going to be able to manage it, you know, readily when something happens. Know who does what. Know, you know, assign people to do things. You know, we do have multi-agency drills with us once in a while. Communicate, document, and review an incident. You know, if you have something that does happen, go over it with your personnel, and just look to see where you made mistakes, or just critique it. It's not to be critical of what we're doing, it's just to improve upon what you did, and we do that all the time. So lots of training. We train with our new equipment. We train our firefighters. We train down below in the middle. That's ASHA training. That's with law enforcement. We practice an active shooter drill. So we, you know, the more things that happen out in the community, the more things we have to be ready for, and we practice as often as we can. You know, again, you got to train on probable events, possible events, and unique. And all we have to do now is turn the news on. You can see things happening all around. And we talk about it a lot here, we practice it a little bit. So again, things shouldn't be a surprise when they happen nowadays. You have the planning cycle, mitigation and prevention, you know, these things with planning Ps for planning, mitigation, prevention. You know, we look at lessons, we talk about things that have happened to other people, how would we do it, what would we do, and not deal with it on the day that the event's happening, but be ahead of it. So, that being said, you know, we're very fortunate, I think, in the town of Falmouth. You know, I talked to other departments, other fire chiefs, other emergency management directors. We're going to a class next week, so we try and be involved in training ourselves, and we try and, you know, go to programs that are afforded to us through MEMA, and Craig is also going to some training programs down at the federal level for his fire prevention job, and that helps. Again, that's all, you know, trying to be ahead of things. You know, in his capacity as a fire prevention officer, classes that we're going to next week are being offered to us, and we take advantage of them. We'll have our drill here, or our LEPC meeting next month on the 23rd. We hope everybody makes it for that, and we'll do, you know, our tabletop exercise won't be stressful. We're just going to kind of walk through it. They provided us disc recently. We have to go through it with their program, but we'll all do it together, and we'll just practice. And, you know, and I welcome the input from everybody. I welcome the participation from everybody. And, you know, we're almost through January. You know, hoping that February will be just as, you know, as quiet, but can't guarantee that. So, anyway, so I appreciate the opportunity to pass this along. Went a couple minutes over, but a lot of information there. We just want to show you what we do here in the fire department, what we do with emergency management, and some of the incidences that could, you know, escalate into something that's community-wide. And at any given day, something could happen, and you know, we're very fortunate that we have a great professional staff that's available in the surrounding departments, our partners in the community. Thank you all for for participating and being a resource for us. So it's a team effort, and I appreciate it, and it's very beneficial for us to know that we can call upon everybody here for help. So that being said, any questions, concerns, issues? Yes,
That
Henry.
book you mentioned, the Checklist Manifesto, is that a real book?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, it was the surgeon that did it, he's I think Mass General,
Okay.
and he actually took the idea from the pilots. Because a pilot, even though they've trained thousands of hours and do the exact same thing every time they take off and land, every single time they take off and land, they open a checkbook, the checklist and go over them step by step.
But that had to come about because of multiple crashes.
Yeah.
And then that's when they developed, so smart people got together and said, I should have turned that on. I think the great example is the plane crash that they had many years ago in the Potomac, where a plane hadn't had its de-icing on because it was down in the warmer weather, and it flew into the DC area, and when they were leaving, somehow they didn't have the de-icing mechanisms on because they were in a different area at the time where they didn't need it. So the story goes. So this checklist manifesto not only, as Craig pointed out, was developed through painstaking issues with with early flights and aircraft, but it also, it looked at the medical community and surgery and just medical care for patients that were in critical care units and such. But it also looked at the building industry, that if a skyscraper that's built has to be done with checklists, because if somebody if somebody in the concrete side of it didn't have the right mix, then the whole building's going to have problems later on. So it's an orange cover to it, and it's checklist manifesto. It's very intriguing. So.
On the medical side,
I'm sold.
because they studied it extensively, before and after in the hospital groups that didn't take those recommendations and the ones that did, and just showed it on the surgery side especially, a huge difference. I mean, it goes down, one of the first things for surgeons, is that are we operating on your left leg or your right leg?
Yeah.
Yeah, do you see that now, right? Why are you here for surgery today? Huh?
Who are you?
Who are you?
Yeah.
What's your name? Is this you? So, and because of these changes, it's helped to lessen the stress. It's provided teamwork. As Craig pointed out, a lot of doctors didn't like being told what to do, but the nurse would come up to the doctor and say, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And it took a lot of painstaking discussions, but they all started to develop. The surgeon knew that he had to do these steps. The nurse checked what he was doing. The charge person in that room checked to make sure that the nurse and the doctor were doing it, and all of the incidences of problems that they normally used to see early on dramatically changed, and they had fewer, to the point where they had much greater, outcome for anybody that they were doing medical procedures on, because they followed everything by the book. Something might happen, but they didn't forget something because they actually had somebody checking checkers and everybody was working together. And there's no, and the bottom line is egos were left outside. So, no egos. All right. So, we'll see you the 23rd. Mike, if you want to stick around, we'll follow up with you. And I thank you once again, and we'll see you in February. Have a great day. Thank you.